So you wouldn't mind just position your chair and then we'll set these cameras. However you'd like this.
You're fine.
You're going to be talking to us. We'll be sitting right here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We have enough cameras. You can look in any direction. We'll capture you.
You know, I'll have all this stuff. We'll make sure you have the transcript, everything.
Yeah, okay, no worries.
By the way, this is your tripod.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Excellent.
That's mine. We forgot one of the tripods.
So is that video?
Yes.
The Canon's a video?
Yeah, these DSLRs are basically as good as cameras.
Wow, amazing.
So,
Okay. You can go, okay.
Yeah.
So first question, have you
You're
won
gonna
yet?
slide back a little
Okay.
bit.
Have you won yet? Do you feel like you've won yet?
With Axiom?
Yeah. Do you feel like?
No, I feel like we just got to the starting line.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Well, so we've been doing this for a little over, well, I'd like to say we've been doing it for a little over 10 years. It's getting closer to 12. You know, I mean, we started with a really lofty ambition, and it was, you know, to play a meaningful role in the transformation of the $500 billion legal industry, and you know, but we were, you know, we were two guys in a business plan, and you know, and then the next thing we know, we're half a dozen people, and then we're a dozen people or whatever, with an idea, and you know, we're talking about the legal industry, and the legal industry is you know, it's one of the world's largest and most important service economies. It's a part of the world that hasn't changed a lot in the last you know, several decades, maybe last century, and you know, and there's just a lot of work to do to kind of build up to a critical mass of credibility, you know, in terms of, you know, a little bit just you know, a little bit just sort of infusing the business with the weight that it needs to be a legitimate alternative and a legitimate player in this space. But then there's some more sort of tangible things, like you know, having a certain, you know, minimum kind of what I think of as kind of attorney liquidity. I mean, you've got to be of a certain size and a certain scale and have a certain number of people where you can be that kind of, you can take on a sort of accordion-like type, you know, behavior to respond to, you know, client needs, and then you need a certain level of reach globally. You know, you've got to have a certain kind of proximity to the largest companies in the world, who are really the ones, as you know, who you know, lead and control the legal industry, and so if you're going to play a meaningful role in the transformation of the industry, you've got to be proximate to the people who are going to transform the industry, and those are the biggest companies in the world. And if you're only in one city, that only gives you so much proximity. And you know, now that we're in, you know, we're in almost a dozen around the world, it gives us a different level of proximity. You know, when we have 15 attorneys, you have a certain attorney liquidity. It's not very liquid. Yeah. But when you're approaching 850, that's a very different looking picture. And so, you know, there's a robustness, there's a, you know, there's a sort of kind of capability level, there's a sort of reach and proximity and a whole bunch of things that just say, okay, now we're here, you know, we're in the game.
12 years to get in the game.
12 years to get in the game. 12 years to get our ticket punched, you know? And I tell this to the company just in the last few months, we are finally at the dance, you know? But, or in the game. But, you know, the game's not going to be decided for a while. I mean, we're just at the beginning. I genuinely feel we just got to the starting line, you know? And so, you know, and frankly, in many ways, if the game's transformation, then in a way, there's this concept. It's an evolutionary concept, and you guys probably know more about it than I do if you've even heard of it. But it's an evolutionary concept. It's called punctuated equilibrium. Do you know that concept? Have you ever heard of it?
I do.
You know about it?
Well,
Complex systems.
It's been 5 years doing the things that are in that.
Well, you know
family.
already more about it, I'm sure, than I do. But I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I just know about it.
What's the punctuation in this context?
I think that
What is
Well-
it that's reestablished the new equilibrium to the extent that's what you see that's happened? What's the reset?
Right. I think it's a good. It's a good. I need to think about how to formulate that exactly.
I mean, is it the recession, economic?
Yeah, I do. So I think it was 2008. I mean, that's when it started, you know. And so I want to think about actually whether that is that's the punctuation moment or not exactly, but I think it is. You know, basically, we'd been around for, you know, 8, 9 years at that point. We'd been living this stuff every day. It's all we thought about, all we talked about. You know, we knocked on doors with clients incessantly, telling our story. And, you know, and we built a business. You know, we were a few hundred people, 50 million in revenue, you know, serving a lot of the Fortune 100. We had a business, but we were not making real progress. We had not gotten real traction against our missional objective, which, you know, was to be a force for good and transformational innovation in a changeless legal industry. And so, you know, when you look at why that was, I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with the client mindset. There was interest and there was intrigue around what we were doing and what we were saying, but there wasn't urgency. You know, there wasn't.
08 is when that changed.
Yeah, there wasn't. You know, the thoughts, the ideas, the concepts, the capabilities we had didn't really have currency until 2008. But in 2008, the whole industry pivoted. You know, the financial markets imploded, the economy fell into deep recession, and all of a sudden, there was a demand for a different way of operating, fundamentally different way of operating. And if you look at a lot of the sort of statistics around kind of market frustration, which I think is the early sort of evidence of market disruption, you know, the most compelling ones all sort of are from around 2008, 2009, you know, when people were really feeling caught, you know, and so I think that shifted the mindset, and I think what it's done is it's you know, we've now have as a fixture in the industry, you know, pressure to you know, manage costs in a way that feels like it's delivering value to the company. And that is not going away. I don't think, I haven't talked to anyone who thinks that is just a fleeting, cyclical dynamic. I think people feel we crossed the Rubicon on that. We're now in a different era. And so you have that. And now what's interesting in the post-2008, and this is why I'm not sure if the punctuation moment was in 2008 or if it actually might have been in like 2010 or 11, but I think what's happened, you know, is that fixture is there and it's not, doesn't seem to be going anywhere. In 2009, that wasn't that big of a deal because you had a really intense sort of pressure around costs and doing more with less, but the recession also brought with it diminished activity levels. And so the demand for legal services actually fell off a cliff at the same time that cost pressure was kind of really on the move. And the combination of those two things, they essentially offset each other. The people are able to meet their cost mandates, you know, just because of diminished activity. But that started to creep back in 2009. And then in 2010, it really started to grow. In 2011,
Demand started to grow.
Demand
but
came
cost
back,
pressure
but
stayed.
cost pressure didn't go away. And now, and complexity, which is kind of the, you know, the third dimension, is on the rise. I mean, you've got, you know, much more rigorous and intense regulatory schemes and regimes presenting themselves. You've got further advancements in technology, which makes everything more complex and nebulous, which makes a lawyer's job harder because you're dealing with more intangibles. And then you've got the blurring of geographic boundaries and more globalization, which also makes the lawyer's job more complex. And so you've got, kind of the perfect storm of, increasing demand, increasing complexity, and really intense, first of its kind of cost pressure. And so how do you reconcile all of those things? And when you get into the sort of question of, reconciliation, then now you're in a conversation about doing things in a fundamentally different way. Anyway, that was a very long riff on one question.
You're ready to have that conversation.
Yeah.
You were waiting for 10 years to have that conversation. You were getting ready for it.
Yeah.
Tell me about two things, and you can pick them in the order here. I know that you thought a lot about your brand, but there's also fundamental values that imbue the organization. Can you tell me where that came from and how important that is and how you execute on the brand and the values?
Yeah. Well, the brand, I think great brands are fundamentally informed by great service. And so, the way that I sometimes explain brands to people inside the company who are kind of sometimes thinking about these things for the very first time is I just try to personify it. And so I think of a brand, our brand is essentially a reputation. And if you just actually think about a person's reputation, it's informed by how they behave. And for us, behavior is service. And so our brand is going to be informed by, the way in which we serve, the industry, the way in which we serve clients, specifically the way in which we serve the people who decide to make their career here. And the better we are at that, the more flawlessly we can execute. The clearer it is that we are, out for the best interests of the clients and our attorneys and the other sort of stakeholders that we're here to serve, the better our brand's going to be.
Where did that come from? We all know the story about you being at Davis Pulpit. Where did this idea of clarity around brand and service come from? Where did the clarity come from?
Well, like most things, nothing was clear in the beginning. It just, I think, when you are obsessed, and I'm probably naturally obsessive.
What are you obsessed with?
Just, this is like, this is a life adventure, that kind of a lot of us are on here because we feel that we're in a really unique sort of place and time in terms of having an opportunity to play a real role in the disruption of an industry as important as the legal industry. We just feel like this is, and even this you don't know instantly, but as you the more you work on this and you get around enough like-minded people, and then you start to say, holy crap.
We'll edit that in post.
This is an opportunity, this is a professional opportunity and a personal opportunity on some level that these don't present themselves that often, and there's scarcity on that, and we want to make the most of it, and so you get energized by that, and that I think turns for the right kind of person or the wrong kind of person, that turns into a bit of an obsession. And so I think most of the things I know, I've learned everything on the job. I don't know if I knew any of this intuitively before I got here, or why. I think we're really good at branding, as a company. I do. I think we're really good at branding. I think we're really good at marketing. And I know I have a role in that, I don't know why we're good at it necessarily, or why I might be decent at that. I know that I value it. I think it's really important. And I think that's why, as an organization, in part, that's why we're good at it. Because we hire people in our marketing department who get it, and who care about it, and who are passionate about it, and we hold the bar really high, and we say, this is fundamental. to who we are and our identity and our ability to succeed. And so then it becomes important, and then it becomes something that you're good at. So it's just I think it's, if anything, it's a point of emphasis for us. So that was the value thing. I mean, that was the brand thing, but do you want me to talk to the core values?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So you know, I don't think, you know, everything that we do flows from our core values. So this is kind of, if you think about, like, you know, the company's core strength or all of its behavior emanating from a core or whatever. If I were to go back to my you know, my analogy before and the personification of the brand, you know, our a person's behavior, which informs that person's reputation, comes out of that person's values. It starts with their values, right? And so if you're a company that ultimately wants to have a certain kind of brand and wants to be known for something, well, then you've got to bring a certain sort of service ethic to your work. And that service ethic is going to be informed by your values. So you've got to start with the values, and the values have to be right, or the whole thing falls apart. And so we spend a lot of time, you know, first of all, making sure we have the right values for us, and then making sure that they are present in everything we do. And I think a lot of companies, everybody has core values, so there's nothing differentiating about that. And everyone has laudable core values. Nobody comes up with a set of core values that are unimpressive or, you know, or something that you wouldn't want to aspire to have. But I think the difference is, you know, for some companies those things sit on the shelf, and for some, and I certainly put us in that category, and we may be elite in this way, they inform everything we do. They come into almost every important conversation. They are the way in which we evaluate every single person that comes in here looking for a job. We evaluate them and score them on values. They make up the performance management structure of everybody's semi-annual and annual review. We celebrate them. We do big, you know, sort of award ceremonies at the end of the year around values. It is one of the most important and most enjoyable thing that I get to do all year long. And the rigor and the process that we have around picking our value award winners, you'd think it was like the Academy Awards or something. You know, like PricewaterhouseCoopers practically has to get involved. And so it's
with a suitcase and the whole.
I mean, it is a big deal, and you know, and it started for us pretty early on, and I think, you know, we were a company without having codified it that operated from a place of values. And that was just a little bit who we were. It was the first handful of people we started with. It was just their disposition and nature, and we wanted to be a certain kind of company, and we knew that we had the chance to make it up, and so why wouldn't we make it up in a way that made us proud? And that kind of caught on and was contagious and all of that stuff. But at some point, you know, when you've got the right sort of people around you, the right mentors and advisors, which we did, one of our advisors, a person on our board, you know, said, you need to codify what is special about this place. And that starts with really understanding what your core values are. And so we went through a whole exercise around that. And we did a little bit of research on how to do it the right way. And the thing that really stood out for me in that exercise was we could have put together a set of values to which we aspired. But we made a very deliberate choice to say, if those are our core values, we would have them already. You don't aspire to your core values, you have your core values. I mean, you behave based on what you value. And so we wanted to capture, the things that were kind of best about us, but we couldn't sort of just put a bunch of things in place that weren't true and then aspire to them. Because those are aspirations, those aren't values. And so we were very introspective and quite sober about what were the things that were true about us versus what were the things we wish were true, but that were actually just aspirations that we could take on as challenges, you know? And so we were very introspective and said, these are the things that we think are really true about us, that make us different, that also are positive things. And what's interesting about them is that some of them actually do have a negative side to them. And those things are true here, you know? So our core values are fresh, irresistible, thoughtful, and committed. And interestingly, those all basically describe a person, kind of the ideal person in a way, for Axiom, for the Axiom venture. And they're fairly self-explanatory, but you know, fresh is, you know, bringing a fresh way of thinking, always being in a posture of wanting to sort of innovate and improve things, not sort of taking the status quo, you know, or precedent or history as a given, being willing to challenge kind of everything. And irresistible is what we think of as kind of a subtle magnetism that exists in people where you just can't resist them. You just want to be around them. You want to follow them. And I think that the sort of signal characteristic for me there are people who are really authentic. They're just genuine people. They feel very real and they have weight to them. And so it's hard not to be drawn to people who are naturally very, you know, are just natural and authentic. And irresistibility is really important because we're trying to, again, we're playing a game which is about change in industry. Haven't changed in a long time. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have the kind of people that other people want to be around and other people want to follow. And then, you know, thoughtful, you know, everybody knows what thoughtful is, but, you know, being thoughtful and kind of treating, understanding, and seeing business as a human construct, you know, that was about the sort of, it was about human beings and not about, you know, sort of profits or revenue or whatever. And then the last one is committed, which is, you know, I'm a huge believer that you know, you commit and providence will follow. And we just have, you know, we have no time for people who are not all in. Because we have no, our scarcest resource is time. And we can't, what we're trying to do, the degree of difficulty in what we're trying to do is just too intense. And so if you're not completely committed to the you know, severity of the curve and the demands of the challenge and the, you know, the complexity of the adventure and all that stuff that we're on, and you know, then, you know, this just will never be the place for you. And we're just really clear on that. And so being committed is just you know, is kind of almost just a threshold hygiene thing almost for us. But some of these things have downsides. I mean, thoughtfulness, you know, it can be an incredible thing, but it's actually quite possible in a business environment, particularly a really dynamic one that's growing and changing all the time, that you can overthink stuff and get really tangled trying to get to the right answer all the time, when half the time there's no way for you to know the right answer, and it's better to just kind of pull up and shoot and move on. And we tend to really struggle with that because we got a bunch of people who value being really thoughtful about things and really trying to get things right. And sometimes you just don't know what's going to be right. We're very uncomfortable kind of rolling the dice and moving on. And some companies are great at that. And that's just not who we are, and we suffer because of that sometimes.
But obviously it must be worth it.
Well, I think, you know, I mean, somewhere in the balance, given the particular adventure that we're on, working in the particular industry that we're working in, trying to do, I think, making mistakes in service of trying to get things right and being thoughtful the first time around I think has probably been okay. I mean, at the least it's been okay, and maybe you could say actually that's been a posture that has served us well.
So tell me where the idea of commit yourself and providence will follow. I can think of lots of things going back 100 years that basically say the same thing, but where did that come from for you?
You know, I don't know, I mean, well, I think I've heard the phrase before, so I think it's a standard, you know, it's not those aren't my words, I've sort of borrowed them from somebody else.
Sure.
But, you know, I think for me, I just have seen too many times where we've tried to hedge our bets, or I have personally in other aspects of my life, and you don't learn enough, you know, and you don't do enough to prevail, you know. But I've also seen it. I've seen that manifest itself in really in ways that have nothing to do with this company or anything. I mean, just I can remember. I can think of several instances across my life where I've made a decision to do something. You know, I'm going to, at the end of law school, I decided I'm not going to sit for the bar. I'm going to basically just travel around the world by myself for the next 9 weeks, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I wanted to live, and so why commit 3 months of my life to something that, you know, I'm just going to have to deal with later when I decide what I'm doing. And so I made that decision, and it was incredible. The people who came out of the woodwork, the stuff, the opportunities that just fell in my lap. You know, once I started talking about what I was doing, just how all these sort of, this chain reaction of dominoes that just fell perfectly, that just completely laid out the path for me for the next, you know, the next 2 or 3 months, and created this incredible adventure, you know, that I think we're just kind of a little bit of a function to just committing to going to do that. And the world lined up around it and said, this is the right thing to do, and, you know, we're going to kind of take you by the hand, sort of thing. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen that play out a lot in life.
I want to change gears. You can ask a question if you want to, Dan. I'm really interested in knowing how your model is evolved and where the big upside is, where you're going to have a huge impact in the next 5 to 7 years. What's the sweet part of your model that's really going to disrupt everything?
Yeah. Well, so I think that I think I'm trying to think of the way to sort of get into this, but so just a tiny bit of context, right? So we think, you know, there is fundamental change coming to this industry that's inexorable. It's going to happen. It is inevitable, and we believe that that kind of transformation will be led by general counsel. It's going to sort of start what we think of as on the inside, and we also believe that where law departments will choose to invest in transformation and innovation and change, they are going to be required to fundamentally rethink their purpose, their role, and their model for managing risk. And so Axiom is in service of the general counsel who are going to lead the transformation of this industry. And by the way, that's a finite number of people. It's a very navigable number of people. You know, they're you know, we're talking about a population probably of somewhere between, you know, 200 to 300 people, and they're the general counsels of the largest 200 to 300 people, 200 to 300 companies around the world, and between them they control nearly half the legal market. And so the way in which those people choose to take the industry forward is where the industry is going. And it's kind of as simple as that. And so we're obsessed with what do they care about, what do they need, where are they going, you know, and to the extent we can help them, you know, think about that, shape their vision, shape and paint the vision for where they can go, and then help them get there, then we know we will be relevant to the reason we exist, which is to participate in this transformation of this industry. And so where do I think that relevance is going to happen? I think if they're in a posture where they've got to fundamentally rethink their own role and their model for managing risk, I think that ultimately the part of our business that is going to be most instrumental there is what we call managed services. And the reason managed services is interesting, fundamentally interesting, you know, kind of at its core, is that I think it solves for what has been the most significant obstacle to innovation across the last many decades in this industry. And that is the perceived zero-sum trade-off between risk and cost. So, you know, we work with, this is all we do. Most of our clients, well, all of our clients, have really important and intense day jobs. You know, we do nothing but basically spend time working on the business challenges inherent to the delivery of legal services in service of our general counsel and their direct reports and helping them work out the way forward. And a lot of them have a meaningful appetite to figure out how to move forward. But where we tend to get stuck as an industry is we know cost management and becoming more efficient and getting better value and doing more with less is really important. We know that because we're observant and we're self-aware, but we also know it because we're being told that that's really important. And so we know that's critical, but the way in which we think about managing risk has essentially set up a fairly binary equation or a zero-sum trade-off between making progress on the innovation or cost dimension with our ability to do what we're here to do, which is to manage risk. And so the way that ends up manifesting itself is that typically speaking, if we want to make progress on you know, becoming more efficient, we typically see that as coming with a cost or trade-off, and that cost is we're going to increase risk. Sorry, this is getting a little. The best way for me to do this actually is to illustrate it.
Sure.
For you.
Great.
Should I bring in a whiteboard?
Yeah.
Yes, that was